Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
What if the distance you feel right now isn't separation at all? What if the silence, the calm, the lack of contact is actually the final stage before everything changes? And what if the moment you stopped chasing was the moment your twin flame union began? Most people think union looks like a message, a reunion, a clear sign. But what if union doesn't arrive loudly? What if it arrives quietly inside you first? Think about this. Why does the connection feel calmer now? Why are you no longer obsessing the way you used to? Why does something inside you feel strangely at peace? Could it be that nothing is falling apart? Or is everything finally aligning? Chapter 1. What if the distance you feel is actually a sign of union? What if the silence you're experiencing right now is not distance, but preparation? What if the emptiness, the stillness, the lack of messages, the absence of contact is not the end of your story, but the beginning of something far deeper than what you've been hoping for? And what if the moment you feel furthest away from your twin flame is actually the moment you are closest to union? Most people on the twin flame journey never consider this possibility. Because everything we are taught about love tells us the opposite. We are taught that closeness means connection. That communication means progress. That presence means love. So when silence appears, when distance grows, when the person you feel most connected to suddenly becomes unavailable, it feels like something has gone wrong. It feels like loss. It feels like confusion. It feels like the connection is slipping away from you. But what if that feeling is misleading? What if the very thing you interpret as separation is actually transformation? Because the truth is, the twin flame journey does not follow the rules of ordinary relationships. It is not built on constant communication. It is not sustained by physical proximity. And it does not move forward in a straight line. Instead, it unfolds in layers. Invisible layers. Energetic layers. Emotional layers that often contradict everything you expect love to feel like. And this is why so many people misunderstand the stage right before union. Because on the surface it doesn't look like union at all. It looks like silence. It looks like detachment. It looks like distance. But beneath that surface something powerful is happening. Something that cannot be seen through messages, conversations, or physical presence. Something that is happening inside both individuals, whether they are aware of it or not. You see, most people believe that union is something that happens when two people finally come together. They imagine it as a moment, a reunion, a conversation, a decision to be together again. But what if union is not a moment? What if it is a state of alignment, a state where both individuals have reached a certain level of inner balance? A state where the energy between them no longer creates resistance. Because before union can happen externally, it must happen internally. And that internal shift does not always feel good. In fact, it often feels like loss. Because in order for alignment to occur, something has to be released. Expectations, attachments, the need for control, the need to know what the other person is thinking, feeling, or doing. All of these things begin to dissolve slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly. And as they dissolve, the connection begins to change. But here's the part that confuses so many people. When this transformation begins, it does not feel like you are moving closer to your twin flame. It feels like you are moving away. You might notice that you are no longer checking your phone as often. You might notice that your thoughts about them are becoming less intense. You might notice that the emotional urgency you once felt is fading. At first, this can feel unsettling. Because for so long, your connection to them was tied to intensity. The thinking, the longing, the emotional highs and lows. It felt like proof that the connection was real. So when that intensity begins to calm down, a question naturally appears. Does this mean I'm losing the connection? And this is where the misunderstanding happens. Because what feels like losing the connection is actually stabilizing it. Think about it. If a connection only exists when it is intense, emotional, and overwhelming, is it truly stable? Or is it reactive? The twin flame journey often begins with emotional intensity because it is designed to awaken you, to shake you out of old patterns, to bring unresolved emotions to the surface, to force you to confront parts of yourself you may have avoided for years. But that intensity is not meant to last forever, because true union cannot exist in chaos. It cannot exist in emotional imbalance. It cannot exist when one person is constantly chasing and the other is constantly running. At some point, the energy must settle. The emotional storm must quiet down. And both individuals must return to themselves. This is where the real shift begins. And this shift often feels like distance. Because when you are no longer chasing, when you are no longer emotionally reacting, when you are no longer trying to control the outcome, the dynamic between you changes completely. The connection is still there, but it feels different, quieter, calmer, more subtle, almost like it has moved from the surface of your life into the background. And this is where doubt can creep in. You might start wondering if the connection is fading. You might question whether it was real at all. You might feel like something important is slipping away from you. But what if nothing is slipping away? What if something is actually coming together? Because here's something most people don't realize. Union is not created by holding on. It is created by letting go. Not letting go of the connection itself, but letting go of the need to control it. The need to define it. The need to force it into a specific timeline or outcome. When you release those things, something shifts. Your energy changes. Your focus returns to yourself. Your sense of identity becomes independent again. And this is where alignment begins. Because the twin flame journey is not about losing yourself in another person. It is about finding yourself through the connection. So when you begin to feel less attached, less reactive, less dependent, it does not mean you are moving away from your twin flame. It means you are moving closer to yourself. And paradoxically, that is exactly what brings you closer to them. Because the connection between twin flames is not based on need. It is based on resonance. And resonance can only occur when both individuals are in a balanced state. So if you find yourself in a place where things feel quieter, where the emotional intensity has softened, where you are no longer chasing answers, where you are no longer trying to force the connection to move forward, then you might be standing at the edge of something important. Something that does not look like union on the surface, but is actually preparing you for it on a deeper level. And this is why the signs of union are often misunderstood. Because they don't feel like excitement. They don't feel like dramatic breakthroughs. They don't feel like sudden reunions. They feel like stillness. They feel like peace. They feel like a quiet confidence that something is aligning even if you cannot see it yet. So instead of asking yourself, why does it feel like we are so far apart? Try asking a different question. What if this distance is creating the space we need to finally come together? Because sometimes, the moment everything becomes quiet is the moment everything begins to align. And if you are in that space right now, then you might be closer to union than you think. Chapter 2. Union is not a reunion, it's an alignment. When most people hear the word union, they immediately imagine something very specific. They imagine a message after a long period of silence. A call that finally happens after months of distance. A meeting, a conversation, a moment where everything is explained and resolved. In other words, they imagine reunion. Two people, once separated, coming back together again. And while reunion can be part of the twin flame journey, it is not the same thing as union. In fact, many people experience reunion without ever reaching true union. And that's where confusion begins. Because if union isn't just about being together physically, then what is it? To understand this, we have to step away from the way we usually define love. In ordinary relationships, closeness is measured externally. You talk often. You spend time together. You share your lives. And when those things are present, the relationship feels real. But the twin flame connection operates on a different level. It is not defined by proximity. It is not sustained by constant communication. And it is not proven by how often you see or hear from each other. Instead, it is defined by something much deeper. Alignment. Union is not about two people deciding to be together. It is about two individuals reaching a state where their energy no longer resists each other, where their internal worlds are no longer in conflict, where their fears, patterns, and emotional reactions have been transformed enough to allow connection without chaos. And this is where many people struggle, because alignment is invisible. You cannot see it in messages. You cannot measure it through actions. You cannot confirm it through external validation. It happens internally, quietly, gradually, and often without immediate results in the physical world. This is why the stage before union can feel so confusing. Because externally, nothing seems to be happening. There may be no contact, no progress, no clear sign that anything is changing. But internally, everything is shifting. You might begin to notice subtle changes within yourself. The way you think about your twin flame begins to evolve. You are no longer constantly analyzing their behavior. You are no longer trying to decode every small sign. You are no longer building your emotional state around whether or not they reach out. Instead, something unexpected begins to happen. You start to feel grounded, more stable, more present in your own life. At first, this shift can feel almost unsettling, because for so long, your connection to them was tied to intensity. The thinking, the longing, the emotional highs and lows. It felt like that intensity was proof of the connection. So when things begin to calm down, it can create a sense of uncertainty. Why don't I feel the same urgency anymore? Does this mean the connection is fading? Am I losing them? But what if you are not losing them at all? What if you are finally reaching the state that allows union to exist? Because union does not thrive in emotional chaos. It does not grow in constant longing or imbalance. It requires stability. It requires presence. It requires two individuals who are no longer trying to fill a void within themselves through the connection. And this is where the deeper purpose of the twin flame journey reveals itself. It was never meant to be about chasing another person. It was meant to lead you back to yourself, to help you confront the parts of you that seek validation, control, or emotional dependency, to help you build a sense of wholeness that exists independently of the connection. And when you begin to reach that state, something changes. You no longer feel the same need to control the outcome. You are not waiting for a message to feel complete. You are not defining your happiness based on whether or not they return. Instead, you begin to experience a quiet form of trust. Not necessarily trust in a specific outcome, but trust in the process itself. Trust that whatever is meant to happen will happen without forcing it. This is the beginning of alignment. And alignment changes the entire dynamic of the connection. Before this stage, the relationship often operates through polarity. One person moves closer. The other moves away. One person seeks answers. The other avoids them. This push and pull dynamic creates emotional tension. And while that tension can feel intense and meaningful, it is not sustainable, because it is driven by imbalance. But when alignment begins, that imbalance starts to dissolve. The need to chase fades. The instinct to run softens. And both individuals begin to stand more firmly in their own energy. Even if they are not in contact. Even if they are living separate lives. This is what makes the twin flame journey so unique. Because the connection continues evolving even in silence. Even in distance. Even when nothing appears to be happening externally. And this is why so many people misunderstand the stage before union. Because they are looking for external confirmation. They are waiting for something to happen in the physical world to prove that the connection is moving forward. But union does not begin in the physical. It begins in the energetic. It begins in the internal shifts that cannot be seen, but can be felt. And sometimes the most important progress happens when everything looks still. Because stillness allows integration. It allows the lessons of the journey to settle. It allows emotional patterns to transform without interference. And it allows both individuals to reach a point where connection is no longer driven by need but by choice. So if you find yourself in a phase where things feel quieter, where the emotional intensity has softened, where you are no longer chasing or trying to control the outcome, then you may be closer to union than you realize. Not because something dramatic has happened, but because something fundamental has changed within you. And that internal change is what makes union possible. Because when two people are no longer trying to complete each other, when they are no longer projecting their fears or expectations onto the connection, when they are able to stand fully in their own energy, then the connection can exist without resistance, without pressure, without the need for constant reassurance. And that is what true union is. Not just being together, but being aligned. And when alignment is present, reunion is no longer something you have to chase. It becomes something that can unfold naturally, at the right time, in the right way, without force, without fear. So instead of asking yourself when reunion will happen, try asking a different question. Am I becoming the version of myself who can experience union without losing myself in it? Because that is the real journey. And when you begin to understand that, you stop waiting for union to arrive. And you start realizing that in many ways, it has already begun. Chapter 3. The first sign you are no longer obsessed. There is a moment in the twin flame journey that many people don't recognize when it first happens. In fact, when it arrives, it often feels confusing. Sometimes even a little uncomfortable. Because it feels like something important is fading. But in reality, this moment marks the beginning of one of the most powerful shifts toward union. It is the moment when you are no longer obsessed. For a long time, your thoughts may have revolved around your twin flame. You woke up thinking about them. You went to sleep thinking about them. Every small sign, every coincidence, every memory felt like something you needed to understand. You replayed conversations. You analyzed their behavior. You wondered what they were feeling, what they were thinking, what they were going to do next. Your mind became a constant loop of questions. Why did they say that? What does this mean? Are they coming back? Do they still think about me? And even when you tried to focus on something else, your thoughts would find their way back to them. Almost automatically. Almost like your mind had been trained to return to that connection no matter what. At first, this intensity felt meaningful. It felt like proof. Proof that the connection was real. Proof that it mattered. Proof that something deep and undeniable existed between you. Because ordinary connections don't consume your thoughts like that. Ordinary relationships don't create that level of emotional gravity. So the obsession became part of how you define the connection. If you felt it strongly, it meant it was real. If you couldn't stop thinking about them, it meant they were your twin flame. But here's the truth that most people don't realize until much later. Obsession is not alignment. It is imbalance. It is a sign that your energy is heavily focused outside of yourself. That your emotional state is being influenced by something beyond your control. And while that intensity can feel powerful, it also creates instability. Because when your thoughts and emotions are centered around another person, your sense of self becomes dependent on them. Their actions affect your mood. Their silence creates anxiety. Their presence brings temporary relief. And this creates a cycle of emotional highs and lows. A cycle of hope and disappointment. A cycle that keeps you energetically tied to the connection in a way that is not sustainable. This is why, at a certain point in the journey, something has to change. The intensity has to soften. The obsession has to dissolve. And this is where the first sign of approaching union appears. You start thinking about them less. Not because you stopped caring. Not because the connection is gone. But because your energy is returning to you. At first, this shift can feel strange. You might notice that hours go by without thinking about them. Then days. You might realize that you're no longer checking your phone as often. You're no longer looking for signs in everything. You're no longer analyzing every detail of the past. And when you do think about them, the feeling is different. It's calmer, softer, less urgent. Instead of a wave of emotion pulling you in, it feels more like a gentle awareness. They cross your mind, but they don't consume it. And this is where doubt often appears. Because if you've spent so long associating intensity with connection, the absence of that intensity can feel like loss. You might ask yourself, why don't I feel the same way anymore? Is the connection fading? Am I moving on? Does this mean it wasn't real? But what if the opposite is true? What if this is the first time your connection is becoming stable? Think about it. A connection that depends on constant emotional intensity is not balanced. It is reactive. It rises and falls based on external triggers. But a stable connection does not need constant stimulation to exist. It simply is. And this is what you begin to experience when the obsession fades. The connection becomes quieter, but also stronger, more grounded, more integrated into your life instead of dominating it. You no longer feel like you are chasing something. You feel like you are standing in your own space. And from that space, the connection exists naturally, without force, without urgency, without the need to constantly confirm it. This shift is not about losing the connection. It is about changing your relationship to it. Instead of being pulled by it, you begin to coexist with it. And this is a crucial step toward union. Because union cannot exist when one person is consumed by the connection. It requires balance. It requires both individuals to have a stable sense of self. It requires a connection that does not overwhelm but complements. And this is exactly what begins to form when obsession dissolves. You start to feel more present in your own life. You focus on things that matter to you. Your goals, your growth, your experiences. You begin to rediscover parts of yourself that were overshadowed by the intensity of the connection. And in doing so, you become more whole, more centered, more aligned. This is what makes this stage so powerful, because it shifts the dynamic completely. Before, your energy was flowing outward, toward them, toward the connection, toward something you were trying to understand or reach. Now your energy flows inward, toward yourself, toward your own stability, toward your own sense of identity. And this inward movement is what creates alignment. Because when you are aligned with yourself, you no longer create resistance within the connection. You are not chasing. You are not forcing. You are not reacting. You are simply existing. And from that state, something interesting begins to happen. The connection starts to feel effortless. Not because everything is resolved externally, but because internally, you are no longer in conflict. You are no longer trying to control what happens. You are no longer waiting for something to change. You are at peace with where you are. And that peace is one of the strongest indicators that union is approaching. Because union is not built on urgency. It is built on stability. So if you find yourself in a place where your thoughts are no longer consumed, where the intensity has softened, where you can think about them without losing yourself in the feeling, then you are not losing the connection. You are transforming it. You are moving from imbalance to alignment, from obsession to stability, from chasing to allowing. And this is the first sign that union is closer than you think. Because the moment you no longer need to hold on to the connection so tightly is the moment it begins to settle into something real, something grounded, something that does not require constant attention to exist. And when you reach that state, you begin to understand something important. Love was never meant to feel like obsession. It was meant to feel like peace. And if you're starting to feel that peace now, then you are already closer to union than you realize. Chapter 4. The second sign you return to yourself. After the intensity begins to fade, after the constant thinking, the emotional highs and lows, the restless search for answers starts to quiet down, something new begins to emerge. At first, it is subtle, almost unnoticeable. It doesn't arrive as a dramatic realization or a sudden breakthrough. It feels more like a quiet shift, a gentle redirection of your attention, a slow movement away from the connection and back toward yourself. This is the second sign that union is closer than you think. You begin to return to your own life. For a long time, your energy may have been centered around your twin flame. Even when you were physically engaged in your daily routine, a part of your mind was always elsewhere, thinking about them, wondering about them, trying to understand what the connection meant. Your focus was divided, half in your own world and half in the space between you and them. But now something begins to change. You wake up and realize that your first thought is not about them. You go through your day and notice that you are more present in what you are doing. You begin to reconnect with things that once felt distant. Your work, your goals, your passions, your relationships with other people. At first, this can feel unfamiliar, because for so long, your sense of purpose may have been intertwined with the connection. You may have believed that everything was leading toward union, that your growth, your healing, your experiences were all centered around that one outcome. So when your focus shifts away from them, it can create a strange feeling, almost like you are stepping away from something important. You might ask yourself, should I still be focusing on this connection? Am I forgetting them? Does this mean I'm giving up? But what if this shift is not about leaving the connection behind? What if it is about finally stepping into yourself? Because the truth is, the twin flame journey was never meant to take you away from your life. It was meant to bring you back to it, to help you rediscover who you are outside of the connection, to remind you that your purpose, your identity, and your happiness do not depend on another person. And this is why returning to yourself is such an important sign, because it shows that your energy is no longer being pulled outward. It is stabilizing within you. You begin to take interest in things that have nothing to do with the connection. You might set new goals, explore new ideas, reconnect with old passions, or simply find joy in small, everyday moments. Things that once felt insignificant now feel meaningful again. And this shift is not forced. You are not trying to distract yourself. You are not pretending to move on. You are simply living. And this is where the deeper transformation begins. Because when your focus returns to your own life, something else changes. Your sense of self becomes stronger. You are no longer defined by the connection. You are no longer measuring your worth based on whether or not they are present. You are no longer waiting for something external to give you a sense of completion. Instead, you begin to feel whole on your own. And this is one of the most important steps toward union. Because union cannot exist when one person is incomplete. It cannot be built on dependency. It cannot thrive when one person is constantly looking to the other for validation, reassurance, or identity. It requires two individuals who are already whole. Two people who are not trying to fill a void, but who are choosing to connect from a place of fullness. And this is exactly what begins to happen when you return to yourself. You are no longer seeking something from them. You are no longer trying to make the connection work. You are simply becoming who you are meant to be. And in doing so, you create a different kind of energy. An energy that is grounded, stable, self-contained. And this energy changes the dynamic between you and your twin flame, even if there is no physical contact. Because the connection between twin flames is not only physical, it is energetic. And when your energy shifts, the connection responds. When you were focused outward, your energy created a pull, a sense of pressure, a need for something to happen. But now that pressure is gone. The pull has softened. And in its place there is space. Space for both individuals to exist without resistance. And this is where alignment begins to deepen. You may notice that your emotional state is no longer tied to their actions. If they don't reach out, you are still okay. If nothing changes externally, you are still stable. Your peace is no longer dependent on the connection. It comes from within you. And this is where the real power lies. Because when your peace comes from within, You are no longer controlled by external circumstances. You are not waiting. You are not hoping. You are not reacting. You are simply living your life. And this creates a natural flow, a sense of ease that was not present before. Because earlier in the journey, everything may have felt heavy. Every thought carried weight. Every emotion felt intense. Every moment seemed connected to the outcome of the relationship. But now that weight is lifting. Life feels lighter, more open, more fluid. And this lightness is not a sign that the connection is fading. It is a sign that it is integrating, becoming part of your life rather than the center of it. And this integration is what allows union to happen. Because union is not about losing yourself in another person. It is about maintaining yourself while being connected. It is about standing in your own energy while allowing the connection to exist naturally. And this is only possible when you have fully returned to yourself. When you no longer need the connection to define you. When you no longer feel incomplete without it. When you are able to experience your life fully with or without them. This is when something shifts on a deeper level. Because the moment you stop chasing the moment, you stop searching the moment, you stop trying to control the connection. You become magnetic. Not because you are doing anything specific, but because your energy is now balanced. You are not pulling. You are not pushing. You are simply present. And presence is one of the most powerful states you can be in, because it allows everything to unfold naturally, without force, without resistance, without fear. So if you find yourself reconnecting with your life, if you notice that your focus is no longer centered on the connection, if you feel more grounded, more present, more engaged in your own world, then you are not moving away from your twin flame. You are moving into alignment. You are becoming the version of yourself who can experience union without losing your identity. And this is why returning to yourself is not a step backward. It is a step forward. A necessary step. A foundational step. Because the closer you come back to yourself, the closer you come to union. Not through effort. Not through control. But through alignment. And when you are aligned with yourself, the connection no longer needs to be chased. It begins to meet you where you stand. Chapter 5. The third sign: the runner begins to feel you differently. There is a moment in the twin flame journey that you may never witness directly, yet you will feel its impact. It is quiet, subtle, almost invisible from the outside. But energetically, it changes everything. This is the moment when the runner begins to feel you differently. For a long time, the dynamic between you and your twin flame may have followed a familiar pattern. You moved toward the connection. They moved away from it. You felt the pull to understand, to connect, to bring clarity. They felt the need to create distance, to protect themselves, to avoid the intensity. This push and pull dynamic can feel deeply frustrating. Because from your perspective, the connection feels undeniable. So why would they run from something so real? Why would they create distance from something that feels so meaningful? But the truth is, the runner is not running from you. They are running from what the connection reveals within them. The depth of the bond. The vulnerability it requires. The parts of themselves that they may not be ready to face. So instead of moving closer, they step back. Not because the connection isn't real, but because it feels too real. And for a long time, your energy may have been part of this dynamic. Your focus, your attention, your emotional investment. All of it created a strong, energetic presence around them. Even if they didn't consciously acknowledge it, they could feel it. And sometimes, that energy felt like pressure. Not intentional pressure, but pressure nonetheless. The constant awareness that someone is thinking about them, feeling them, waiting for them. And that pressure can make it harder for the runner to approach the connection. Because it amplifies the intensity they are already trying to avoid. But then something changes. As you begin to shift, as you return to yourself, as your focus moves inward instead of outward, the energy between you starts to transform. The pressure disappears. The emotional pull softens. The constant energetic reach is no longer there. And this is where the runner begins to experience something new. Silence. Not just external silence, but energetic silence. The absence of the constant attention they were used to. The absence of the emotional pull they felt from you. At first, they may not consciously notice this change. Life continues. Their routines, their responsibilities, their distractions. Everything seems the same on the surface. But underneath, something feels different. Something is missing. And when something that was always present suddenly disappears, it creates space. Space for awareness. Space for reflection. Space for feelings to surface that were previously buried under the need to run. The runner may begin to experience small moments of curiosity. They might think about you unexpectedly. A memory appears without warning. A moment you shared comes back into their mind. A feeling they once avoided starts to resurface. At first, these moments are brief. Easy to ignore. Easy to dismiss. But as time passes, they begin to occur more often. Because the absence of your energy has created a vacuum. And that vacuum begins to pull their attention inward, toward the connection they once avoided. This is where the shift begins. Because before, the runner was reacting to your energy. Now they are experiencing their own. They are no longer being pushed away by intensity. They are being drawn in by absence. And absence can be more powerful than presence. Because when something is constantly available, it becomes familiar, almost expected. But when it is no longer there, it becomes noticeable. It creates questions. It creates awareness. It creates a sense of something missing. And this is when the runner begins to feel you differently. Not as a source of pressure. Not as something they need to escape. But as something they are beginning to notice in its absence. They may not immediately understand what is happening. They may not label it as a realization about the connection. But they begin to feel a shift. A subtle change in how they perceive you. And this is where their perspective starts to evolve. Before, the connection may have felt overwhelming. Now it begins to feel intriguing. Before, your presence may have triggered avoidance. Now your absence triggers curiosity. Before, they may have focused on what felt difficult about the connection. Now they begin to remember what felt meaningful. And this is where the emotional balance begins to change. Because for the first time, the runner is not reacting. They are reflecting. They are experiencing the connection without the same level of fear. Without the same need to escape. Without the same pressure that once pushed them away. And in that space, new feelings can emerge. Not necessarily all at once. Not necessarily in a clear or conscious way. But gradually. Curiosity becomes interest. Interest becomes reflection. Reflection becomes emotion. And emotion begins to take shape. They may start wondering what you are doing. How your life is going. Whether you are still thinking about them. Whether you have moved on. These questions are not driven by external triggers. They are arising from within. And this is a completely different experience for them. Because now, they are engaging with the connection from their own energy, not reacting to yours. And this is what creates the possibility for movement. Not forced movement. Not reactive movement. But conscious movement. Because when the runner begins to feel the connection from within themselves, something changes. They are no longer running away from it. They are beginning to turn toward it. Even if that movement is slow. Even if it is subtle. Even if it is not yet visible in their actions. The internal shift has already begun. And this is why this sign is so important. Because it shows that the dynamic between you has changed at an energetic level. You are no longer chasing. They are no longer being pushed away. The energy is no longer imbalanced. Instead, it is beginning to equalize. And when that balance begins to form, the connection becomes stable. Not driven by intensity. Not controlled by fear. But supported by alignment. So even if you don't see immediate changes in their behavior, even if there is still silence externally, even if nothing seems to be happening on the surface, something is shifting beneath it all. The runner is beginning to feel you in a new way. A way that is not overwhelming. a way that is not triggering, a way that allows them to approach the connection instead of avoiding it. And this is the beginning of a new phase. A phase where the roles are no longer fixed. A phase where the dynamic is no longer one-sided. A phase where both individuals are moving toward balance. And this is why this sign is often misunderstood. Because it doesn't always come with visible proof. It doesn't always show up as a message, a call, or a sudden return. It happens quietly, internally, energetically. But its impact is profound. Because the moment the runner begins to feel you differently is the moment the path toward union begins to open. Not through force, not through chasing, but through alignment. And if you are in a place where you have returned to yourself, where your energy is stable, where you are no longer reaching outward, then this shift may already be happening, even if you cannot see it yet. Because sometimes, the most important changes in the connection are the ones you never witness directly. But you feel them in the way everything begins to move differently. And when that movement starts, union is no longer something far away. It is something that has already begun unfolding quietly beneath the surface. Chapter 6. The fourth sign: a strange, unshakable peace begins to settle in. There is a stage in the twin flame journey that feels almost unfamiliar. Not because it is dramatic or intense, but because it is the opposite. It is quiet. It is calm. It is steady. And for many people, it feels so different from everything they have experienced before that they don't even recognize it as progress. In fact, they often mistake it for disconnection. Because after everything you have been through, the longing, the confusion, the emotional highs and lows, the sudden arrival of peace can feel strange. Almost suspicious. You might even find yourself asking, why do I feel so calm all of a sudden? Shouldn't I still be missing them this intensely? Does this mean the connection is fading? But what if this peace is not a sign of losing the connection? What if it is a sign that you are finally aligning with it? Because this is the fourth sign that union is closer than you think. A deep, unshakable sense of peace begins to settle inside you. And it does not come from external confirmation. It does not come from a message. It does not come from a conversation or a reunion. It comes from within. At first, this peace may appear in small moments. A few hours where you feel grounded. A day where you don't feel the need to check your phone. A moment where you think about them and instead of feeling pain, you feel acceptance. Then those moments begin to expand. Hours turn into days. Days turn into longer stretches of time where your emotional state remains steady. You are no longer being pulled into emotional extremes. You are not constantly swinging between hope and doubt. Instead, there is a quiet stability. And this stability changes everything. Because earlier in the journey, your emotional experience may have been tied to external triggers. If they reached out, you felt relief. If they pulled away, you felt anxiety. If something reminded you of them, your emotions would intensify. Your inner state was constantly reacting to what was happening outside of you. But now that pattern begins to dissolve. You start noticing that your emotions are no longer dictated by their actions. If there is silence, you are still okay. If nothing changes externally, you remain grounded. You are no longer searching for reassurance. You are no longer trying to predict what will happen next. You are simply present. And this presence creates peace. But here is where it gets interesting. This peace does not feel like indifference. It does not feel like you have stopped caring. You still feel the connection. You still recognize its significance. You still understand that something meaningful exists between you. But the way you relate to it has changed. You are no longer attached to it in the same way. You are no longer holding on to it tightly. You are allowing it to exist without trying to control it. And that shift is what creates this sense of calm. Because attachment creates tension. The need to know. The need to understand. The need to control. All of these things create internal pressure. They keep your mind active. They keep your emotions unstable. But when that attachment begins to release, the pressure disappears. And what remains is peace. a peace that is not dependent on outcomes, a peace that does not require answers, a peace that exists simply because you are no longer resisting what is. And this is where many people get confused, because they have spent so much time associating love with intensity, with longing, with emotional highs. So when peace appears, it can feel like something is missing, like the connection is becoming less important. But in reality, peace is one of the strongest signs that the connection is becoming real. Because real connection does not create chaos. It does not require constant emotional stimulation. It does not depend on uncertainty to feel meaningful. It exists in stability, in presence, in a quiet understanding that does not need to be proven over and over again. And this is what you begin to experience. You no longer need constant confirmation. You no longer need to analyze every sign. You no longer need to question whether the connection is real. You simply know. And that knowing is calm. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is steady, like a quiet voice in the background of your awareness. Always there, but not demanding attention. And this is what makes this stage so powerful. Because for the first time, your connection is no longer driven by emotional reactivity. It is grounded in inner stability. And this stability allows something else to happen. You begin to trust. Not necessarily trust in a specific outcome, but trust in the process. Trust that whatever is meant to happen will unfold naturally. Trust that you do not need to force anything. Trust that the connection does not need to be controlled in order to exist. And this trust deepens your sense of peace. Because when you trust, you stop resisting. And when you stop resisting, you stop creating internal conflict. You are no longer fighting against uncertainty. You are no longer trying to make things happen on your timeline. You are allowing life to unfold. And that allowance creates space. Space for alignment. Space for growth. Space for the connection to evolve without interference. And this is why peace is such a significant sign. Because it shows that you have reached a level of internal alignment that was not present before. You are no longer in conflict with the situation. You are no longer struggling against what is happening. You are at ease with where you are. And that ease is what makes union possible. Because union cannot exist when there is internal resistance. It cannot exist when one person is in constant emotional turmoil. It requires a stable foundation. A state where both individuals are grounded in themselves. And this is exactly what this peace represents. You have become stable. You have returned to yourself. You have released the need to control. And in doing so, you have created the conditions necessary for union. But here is the paradox. This peace often arrives before any external change occurs. Before any message. Before any reunion. Before any visible movement in the physical world. And this is why it is often misunderstood. Because people are looking for external signs. They are waiting for something to happen outside of them. But the most important sign is happening within them. And if you can recognize this, if you can understand that this peace is not a sign of losing the connection, but a sign of aligning with it, then everything changes. Because you stop questioning it. You stop doubting it. You stop trying to bring back the intensity you once felt. And instead, you allow the peace to deepen. You allow it to guide you. You allow it to become your new normal. And from that place, something beautiful begins to unfold. You are no longer waiting for union. You are no longer chasing it. You are already experiencing the state that makes it possible. And that is what this sign is really showing you. That union is not something that suddenly appears out of nowhere. It is something that builds quietly, internally, through alignment, through stability, through peace. So if you find yourself feeling calmer than before, if the emotional storms have settled, if you are no longer reacting to every small trigger, if you can think about the connection without losing your center, then you are not moving away from union. You are moving into it. Because sometimes, the clearest sign that something is about to come together is the moment everything inside you finally becomes still. Chapter 7. The the fifth sign, the synchronicities return, but they feel different. There is a stage in the twin flame journey where the universe seems to whisper again. Not loudly, not dramatically, but consistently. You begin to notice patterns, little moments that feel too precise to be random, yet too subtle to fully explain. You see their name unexpectedly. You hear a song that instantly reminds you of them. You dream about them in ways that feel more real than imagination. You encounter repeating numbers 11 versus 11 and 222, 444 right when you are thinking about the connection. At first, this may feel familiar, because many people experience synchronicities early in the twin flame journey. During the initial stages, these signs often feel intense. They feel like confirmation, like the universe is trying to prove something to you. You notice them constantly. You search for them. You analyze them. You try to decode what they mean. Every sign feels important. Every coincidence feels like a message you need to understand. But as you move closer to union, something changes. The synchronicities return, but they feel different. They are no longer overwhelming. They are no longer something you chase. They simply appear. And when they do, your reaction is not the same as before. You notice them, but you don't cling to them. You recognize them, but you don't feel the need to interpret every detail. You experience them, but they don't pull you out of your center. And this is what makes this the fifth sign, because it shows that your relationship with the connection has evolved. Before, synchronicities were something you depended on. They reassured you. They gave you hope. They made you feel like you were not imagining the connection. But they also kept you in a state of searching, of waiting, of needing constant confirmation. Now that need is gone. You are no longer looking for proof. You are no longer trying to validate the connection through external signs. And because of that, the signs feel lighter, more natural, almost like gentle reminders rather than urgent messages. They come and go without disrupting your emotional state. You might smile when you notice them. You might pause for a moment. But then you continue with your day. And this is where the deeper meaning begins to reveal itself. Because synchronicities at this stage are not about proving the connection. They are about reflecting alignment. Think about it. When your mind was filled with doubt, fear, and attachment, you needed signs to reassure you. You needed something external to confirm what you were feeling internally. But now you no longer rely on that. Your sense of knowing has become internal. You trust the connection without needing constant evidence. And because of that, the universe no longer needs to shout. It only needs to whisper. And those whispers come in the form of synchronicities. Subtle, consistent, effortless. You may begin to notice that these moments often appear when you are not thinking about the connection, when you are focused on your own life, when you are present, when you are calm. It is almost as if the signs appear when you are not searching for them. And that is not a coincidence, because synchronicity flows with alignment, not with effort, not with searching, but with presence. When you are fully in your own energy, when you are grounded, when you are not trying to control or understand everything. That is when the connection reveals itself in the most natural way. And this is why these synchronicities feel different now. They are no longer pulling you outward. They are meeting you where you are. They are not creating emotional waves. They are blending into your life. And this blending is important because it shows that the connection is integrating, becoming part of your reality instead of something separate from it. Before, the connection may have felt like something outside of you, something you were trying to reach, something you were trying to understand. But now it feels like something that simply exists within you, alongside your life, not consuming it but accompanying it. And this is where synchronicities take on a new role. They are no longer signals of distance. They are reflections of connection, not telling you to move toward something, but reminding you that it is already there. And this is why your reaction to them changes. You are no longer surprised by them. You are no longer overwhelmed by them. You simply notice them and continue. Because deep down you already know. And that knowing is what replaces the need for constant signs. This stage can feel very different from what you expected. Because earlier in the journey, signs felt exciting. They felt like clues. Like pieces of a puzzle you were trying to solve. But now there is no puzzle. There is no urgency to figure anything out. There is only awareness. And that awareness is calm. Steady. Unshaken by external triggers. And this is what makes this sign so significant. Because it shows that you are no longer dependent on external validation. You are no longer seeking confirmation. You are no longer trying to prove the connection. You are simply experiencing it. And that shift is what brings you closer to union. Because union is not about proving the connection. It is about living in it. Not through constant thinking or searching, but through quiet presence. So when synchronicities begin to appear again, when you notice those small, meaningful coincidences, when moments align in ways that feel intentional but not overwhelming, pay attention to how you feel. If you are calm, grounded, unshaken, if you can notice them without losing your center, then you are not at the beginning of the journey. You are at a deeper stage. A stage where the connection no longer needs to be explained. A stage where it no longer needs to be validated. A stage where it simply exists alongside your life. And that is a powerful place to be. Because it means you have moved beyond seeking. Beyond chasing. Beyond trying to understand everything. You have entered a state of allowing. And in that state, everything becomes clearer without needing explanation. So if you find yourself noticing these signs again, but feeling different about them, less reactive, less attached, more peaceful, then this is not a step backward. It is a step forward. A sign that your energy is aligned. A sign that the connection is stabilizing. A sign that you are no longer looking for proof. Because you have become the proof. And when you reach that point, union is no longer something you are trying to reach. It is something you are already living quietly, in the background of your awareness. Chapter 8. The sixth sign: you are no longer afraid of losing them. There is a moment in the twin flame journey that feels almost impossible when you are in the earlier stages. A moment that seems so far away when your heart is full of longing, questions, and uncertainty. Because for a long time, fear may have been at the center of your experience. The fear of losing them. The fear of never hearing from them again. The fear that the connection might not lead to the outcome you hoped for. The fear that everything you felt might not be returned in the way you expected. This fear can shape everything. It can influence how you think, how you feel, how you act. It can make you hold on tighter. It can make you analyze every small detail. It can make you search for signs, reassurance, and confirmation. Because when you are afraid of losing something, your instinct is to protect it, to hold on to it, to make sure it doesn't slip away. And for a long time, that may have been your experience. You may have felt like you needed to keep the connection alive, to stay connected energetically, to think about them, feel them, focus on them almost as if doing so would prevent the connection from fading. But here's the truth that only becomes clear later in the journey. Fear does not preserve a connection. It creates resistance. Because fear is rooted in lack. It is the belief that something can be taken away from you. That something you value is unstable. That you need to hold on in order to keep it. And that belief creates tension. It creates attachment. It creates a sense of urgency. And all of those things prevent the connection from becoming stable. Because stability cannot exist in fear. It can only exist in trust. And this is where the sixth sign begins to appear. You are no longer afraid of losing them. At first, this realization can feel surprising. You might notice it in small moments. You think about them, and instead of feeling anxiety, you feel calm. You imagine a future where things don't unfold the way you once hoped, and instead of feeling fear, you feel acceptance. You consider the possibility that they may not return immediately, and instead of panic, you feel peace. And this is where the shift becomes undeniable. Because for the first time, your emotional state is no longer controlled by the idea of losing them. You are no longer holding on to the connection out of fear. You are allowing it to exist without needing to control it. And this changes everything. Because when fear dissolves, attachment begins to release. You are no longer clinging to a specific outcome. You are no longer trying to ensure that things happen in a certain way. You are no longer trying to protect the connection from uncertainty. You are simply allowing. And allowing creates space. Space for the connection to breathe. Space for both individuals to exist without pressure. Space for things to unfold naturally. And this is where something profound happens. You begin to realize that the connection was never something you could lose. Not in the way you once feared. Because what is truly meant for you does not require constant effort to maintain. It does not require fear to hold it together. It exists independently of your attempts to control it. And this realization brings a deep sense of freedom. You are no longer burdened by the need to make things happen. You are no longer carrying the weight of uncertainty. You are no longer trying to secure something that feels fragile. Instead, you feel stable, grounded, secure within yourself. And this internal security is what replaces fear. Because when you feel secure within yourself, you no longer depend on external circumstances for stability. You are not waiting for them to return in order to feel complete. You are not relying on their actions to determine your emotional state. You are standing fully in your own energy. And from that place, the connection feels different. It no longer feels like something you might lose. It feels like something that simply exists. Whether it is physically present or not. Whether it is expressed externally or not. It is there. And you trust that. Not blindly. Not based on hope. But based on a quiet understanding that has developed within you. And this trust is what makes this sign so important. Because it marks the transition from fear to acceptance. From attachment to freedom. From uncertainty to inner stability. And this transition is essential for union. Because union cannot exist in fear. It cannot be built on the need to hold on. It cannot thrive when one person is constantly worried about losing the other. It requires trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in the process. Trust in the connection. And when that trust is present, everything changes. You are no longer reacting. You are no longer chasing. You are no longer trying to control what happens next. You are simply living your life. And allowing the connection to unfold in its own time. And this is where many people begin to notice something interesting. The less they fear losing the connection, the more stable it feels. The less they try to hold on to it, the more present it becomes. Because fear was never protecting the connection. It was creating resistance within it. And when that resistance is gone, the connection can flow freely. Without tension. Without pressure. Without the need for constant reassurance. And this is what brings you closer to union. Not by forcing something to happen, but by removing the barriers that were preventing it from happening naturally. So if you find yourself in a place where fear is no longer present, where the thought of losing them no longer creates anxiety, where you can accept whatever outcome unfolds without losing your sense of self, then you are not moving away from the connection. You are moving into alignment with it. You are becoming someone who can experience love without fear. Someone who can connect without attachment. Someone who can trust without needing constant confirmation. And that is the version of you who can experience union. Because union is not about holding on to someone. It is about meeting them from a place of wholeness. From a place where love is not driven by fear, but by presence. So the next time you notice that fear is no longer there, that you are no longer worried about what might happen, that you are at peace with whatever unfolds, take a moment to recognize what that means. It means you have grown. It means you have transformed. It means you have reached a level of alignment that makes union possible. Because the moment you are no longer afraid of losing them is the moment you are no longer holding on to them out of fear. And that is when the connection becomes free. Free to exist. Free to evolve. Free to come together without resistance. And that is when union is no longer something you are trying to protect. It is something that can finally unfold. Chapter 9. The seventh sign you are happy without them. There is a stage in the twin flame journey that many people secretly fear. Not because it is painful, but because it feels like a contradiction. For so long, your desire for union may have been connected to a simple belief. I will be happy when we are together. It feels natural. It feels logical. If this person is your twin flame, if this connection is as deep as it feels, then surely being with them must be the ultimate outcome, the ultimate happiness, the ultimate fulfillment. So you move through the journey holding on to that vision. Even when things are difficult. Even when there is distance. Even when nothing seems to be happening externally. You keep telling yourself, when we finally come together, everything will make sense. But then something unexpected begins to happen. Something that challenges that belief in a way you never imagined. You begin to feel happy. Not because you are together. Not because anything has changed externally. But simply because you are. And this is the seventh sign that union is closer than you think. You are happy without them. At first, this realization can feel confusing. Even a little unsettling. Because for so long, your emotional world may have revolved around the connection. Your highs and lows were tied to their presence. Your sense of hope was connected to their actions. Your happiness felt dependent on the possibility of reunion. So when you start experiencing genuine happiness on your own, it can feel like something is shifting. In a way you didn't expect. You might ask yourself, why do I feel okay without them? Shouldn't I still be missing them more? Does this mean I don't care anymore? Am I moving on? But here's the truth. You are not moving away from the connection. You are moving into yourself. And that is what makes this stage so powerful. Because for the first time, your happiness is no longer conditional. It is not dependent on an outcome. It is not tied to whether or not they return. It is not waiting for something external to happen. It is coming from within you. You wake up and feel a sense of calm. You go through your day and find moments of joy in things that have nothing to do with them. You laugh. You engage with your life. You experience fulfillment in ways that feel natural and effortless. And this happiness is not forced. You are not pretending to be okay. You are not distracting yourself. You are genuinely present in your own life. And this presence creates a sense of completeness. You no longer feel like something is missing. You no longer feel like you are waiting for a piece of yourself to return. You feel whole. And this is where the deeper realization begins. The connection was never meant to complete you. It was meant to awaken you. To guide you back to yourself. To show you the parts of you that needed healing. To help you rediscover your own strength, your own identity, your own sense of worth. And now that you have reached this point, you are no longer looking to the connection for fulfillment. You are experiencing fulfillment within yourself. And this changes everything. Because when you are happy without them, you are no longer attached to the outcome. You are no longer holding on to a specific future. You are no longer waiting for something to happen in order to feel complete. You are free. Free from expectation. Free from dependency. Free from the need to control how the story unfolds. And this freedom creates a completely different kind of energy. An energy that is stable, grounded, self-sufficient. And this is what makes this stage so important for union. Because union cannot exist when one person is seeking happiness from the other. It cannot be built on dependency. It cannot thrive when one person feels incomplete without the connection. It requires two individuals who are already whole. Two people who are not trying to fill a void, but who are choosing to connect from a place of fullness. And that is exactly where you are now. You are no longer searching. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer trying to complete something. You are simply living and enjoying your life. And this is where the paradox reveals itself. The moment you stop needing them is the moment the connection becomes possible. Because need creates pressure. It creates expectation. It creates an imbalance where one person is holding on to something that the other may not be ready to receive. But when that need disappears, the pressure disappears with it. The connection becomes lighter, more natural, more aligned. And this alignment is what allows union to unfold. Not through force, not through effort, but through resonance. You are no longer pulling the connection toward you. You are standing in your own energy. And from that place, the connection has the space to meet you. And this is why so many people experience a shift at this stage. Because when you are happy without them, your energy changes. You are no longer chasing. You are no longer seeking validation. You are no longer trying to make something happen. You are simply being. And that state of being is magnetic. Not because you are trying to attract anything, but because you are aligned with yourself. And alignment naturally attracts what resonates with it. So if you find yourself feeling happy, if you notice that your life feels full even without their presence, if you are no longer waiting for something external to bring you joy, then you are not moving away from union. You are moving into it. Because this is the state that makes union possible. A state where love is no longer driven by need, but by choice. A state where connection is not about filling a gap, but about sharing something that already exists within you. A state where you are complete on your own, and open to connection without losing yourself in it. And this is the final sign. The sign that often feels the most unexpected. Because it looks like independence. It looks like self-sufficiency. It looks like you no longer need the connection in the same way. But that is exactly why it matters. Because union is not about needing someone. It is about choosing them. And you can only make that choice when you are already whole. So if you are in a place where you feel happy, calm, complete, without needing them to be present, then you are not losing the connection. You are becoming ready for it. Because the moment you realize that your happiness does not depend on them, is the moment you are finally able to meet them as an equal. Not from a place of lack, but from a place of abundance. And that is where true union begins. Chapter 10. When you stop chasing union, you realize it has already begun. At the beginning of this journey, everything felt like a search. A search for answers. A search for clarity. A search for them. You wanted to understand what this connection meant. You wanted to know where it was going. You wanted to know if it would lead to union. And that desire shaped everything. It shaped the way you thought, the way you felt, the way you interpreted every sign and every silence. It kept you moving forward, but it also kept you restless. Because searching implies that something is missing, that something is not yet here, that something needs to be found. And for a long time, that is how union felt. Like a destination somewhere ahead of you. Something you had to reach. Something that would finally bring everything together. But as you move through the stages we have explored, something begins to shift. You are no longer obsessed. You have returned to yourself. The runner's energy has begun to change. Peace has settled inside you. Synchronicities feel softer, more natural. Fear has dissolved. Happiness no longer depends on them. And when all of these shifts come together, something remarkable happens. The need to search disappears. You are no longer trying to reach union. You are no longer asking when it will happen. You are no longer measuring your progress based on external signs. Instead, you find yourself in a completely different state. A state where everything feels enough. Not because you have all the answers. Not because everything has resolved externally, but because internally something has settled. And this is where the final realization begins to emerge. Union is not something you arrive at. It is something you become. For a long time, you may have thought of union as a moment. A message that changes everything. A reunion that brings clarity. A decision that finally aligns both of you. But now you begin to see that union is not a single event. It is a state of being. A state where you are aligned with yourself. A state where your energy is stable, grounded, and no longer in conflict. A state where the connection exists without needing to be controlled. And when you reach that state, something changes in the way you perceive everything. You stop asking, when will we be in union? And you start noticing, I am already experiencing something that feels like union. Not externally. Not necessarily in the way you once imagined. But internally. In the way you feel. In the way you exist. In the way the connection has settled into your life without overwhelming it. You may still be physically apart. You may still not have clear answers about the future. But something feels different. The urgency is gone. The need to force anything is gone. The pressure to define the connection is gone. And in its place, there is a quiet understanding. A sense that everything is unfolding exactly as it needs to. Without interference. Without force. Without fear. This is where many people become confused. Because they are still looking for a specific outcome. They are still expecting union to look a certain way. They are waiting for something external to confirm that they have reached this stage. But what if that confirmation is not external? What if it is already present within you? Because the truth is, union begins long before it becomes visible. It begins the moment you stop chasing. The moment you stop trying to control the connection. The moment you release the need for it to look a certain way. And the moment you fully return to yourself. That is when union starts to form. Quietly. Internally. Energetically. And as this internal union strengthens, something else begins to happen. The connection in the external world starts to align with it. Not always immediately. Not always in the way you expect. But gradually. Naturally. Without force. Because when you are aligned internally, you no longer create resistance externally. You are not pushing. You are not pulling. You are not reacting. You are simply allowing. And that allowance creates space. Space for things to unfold in their own time. Space for both individuals to meet from a place of balance. Space for the connection to evolve without pressure. And this is what makes this stage so powerful. Because you are no longer dependent on what happens next. You are not waiting for union to begin. You are already experiencing the state that makes it possible. You are living it. In your peace. In your presence. In your stability. In your ability to feel connected without needing constant confirmation. And this is where everything comes full circle. Because at the beginning of the journey, you may have believed that union would complete you. That it would bring you happiness, clarity, and fulfillment. But now you realize something deeper. You have already found those things within yourself. And because of that, union is no longer something you need. It is something that can naturally unfold. And that shift changes everything. Because when you no longer need something, you stop chasing it. And when you stop chasing, you stop creating resistance. And when resistance disappears, alignment becomes possible. So if you find yourself in this place, a place where you feel calm, grounded, and complete, a place where you are no longer searching for answers, a place where the connection exists without controlling your life, then you are not waiting for union. You are living in the early stages of it. Even if it does not look the way you once imagined. Even if it has not yet taken physical form. Because union is not defined by external circumstances. It is defined by internal alignment. And that alignment is already within you. So instead of asking when union will happen, ask yourself something else. What if it has already begun? What if every step you have taken, every shift you have experienced, every moment of peace, clarity, and self-awareness has been leading you here? Not to a destination, but to a state of being. A state where love is no longer something you chase, but something you embody. A state where connection is no longer something you try to control, but something you allow. A state where union is not something you wait for, but something you become. And if you can recognize that, if you can trust that, if you can continue to stay in that state without falling back into old patterns, then everything else will unfold in its own time. Without force. Without struggle. Without fear. Because when you become aligned with yourself, you become aligned with the connection. And when that alignment is complete, union is no longer a question. It is a natural outcome. So now take a moment and reflect. How many of these signs have you experienced? Have you noticed the shift from obsession to calm? Have you felt yourself returning to your own life? Have you experienced that quiet peace, that subtle knowing, that sense of completeness within yourself? If you have, then you may be much closer to union than you think. Not because something dramatic has happened externally, but because something powerful has changed within you. And that is where everything begins. If this resonated with you, share your experience in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. And if you are moving through this journey, remember this. You are not waiting for union. You are becoming it. And that is the most powerful transformation of all.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.